Hi, and welcome to Conductor, where we are two sisters on a mission to amplify women's voices on the podium. Join us as we interview leaders in the field of choral music, share resources, and build a community for current and future teacher conductors, all while exploring the gender divide. I'm Kira Starr. And I'm McKenna and we are Conductor. Well, hello, Conductor fans. My name is Dr. McKenna, and I am here today with two fabulous guests on the podcast. This is a really interesting episode, and I know you're going to just absolutely love hearing about it. I did want to share that for the first time ever, it is just going to be me on the podcast. My dear partner in crime, Kira Starr, could not join us today because the fabulous Kira Starr is taking her DMA comprehensive exams as we record. So we are sending her good vibrations. But I'm just absolutely thrilled because we have Dr. Brittney Boykin with us today. Dr. B.E. Boykin, she's a return guest from our very first season of Conductor, which is crazy. So welcome, Dr. Boykin.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And we have the fabulous Dr. Erika Tazawa also on the podcast with us today. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
So before we start, as per usual, I'm just going to share a little bit about who these awesome conductor teachers are, and we will dive in. Erika Tazawa enjoys a versatile and collaborative musical career, actively performing as a conductor and pianist. She joined the Georgia Institute of Technology as a visiting director in 2014 and has previously taught at Kennesaw State University and Emory University. Tazawa is an active guest conductor of high school honor choirs and festivals and often collaborates with community choirs and Greater Atlanta schools in performances. She is the pianist of a contemporary music ensemble, Bent Frequency, and frequently appears with the Atlanta Symphony and the Atlanta Opera. Tazawa holds degrees in piano from the State University of New York Potsdam and a DMA in conducting from the University of Georgia. Our second guest is B.E. Boykin, Brittney Elizabeth Boykin, who is a distinguished composer, conductor, and pianist, renowned for her dynamic artistry and profound contributions to the world of music, and has been highlighted with performances at prestigious venues such as the Kennedy Center and Carnegie Hall. Boykin's artistic influence has recently extended into the operatic stage, with a series of new commissions. Oshwan 2023, which premiered in the American Opera Initiative with support from the Washington National Opera, and Two Corners 2024, which premiered with Finger Lakes Opera, are her latest creations with librettist Jared Lee. As a sought-after conductor and clinician who is celebrated for her unique artistic expressions and ability to connect with her ensembles, her recent features include conducting the Atlanta Music Project Senior Youth Choir in a closing concert for the 2024 Chorus America Conference and leading them to emerge as the category winner in the 2024 World Choir Games. With a career characterized by artistic excellence, educational impact, and a deep commitment to the cultural advocacy, she is honored to serve as the National Board for the National Collegiate Choral Organization. She is currently an assistant professor of music at the Georgia Institute of Technology. Welcome, Dr. Erika Tazawa and Dr. B.E. Boykin, Dr. Brittney Elizabeth Boykin, to the podcast. We have so much to talk about today. We invited Dr. Boykin and Dr. Tazawa onto the podcast because last month they presented an incredible session at ACDA that was titled Shattering Barriers, Empowering Women of Color in Choral Leadership. So we have a lot to talk about and a lot to ask them about. Before we get started, Erika, would you mind telling us just a little bit about your upbringing and how you came to a career in choral music for those that don't know?
Absolutely. I first came to choral music as a little child. Growing up in Japan, I started taking piano lessons as a pretty young child. And when I saw this, my hometown's children's chorus for the first time, I was blown away that other kids really like music like I do too. And so as soon as I was old enough to audition, I joined the choir. And that just was such a great community for me to not only just train my fundamental skills, but just make friends who were just as geeky as I was. So ever since, I've been such a fan of the choral community.
Well, that's a pretty amazing upbringing and background. And both you and Brittney have a collaborative pianist singer situation going on, which is very cool.
Yeah.
Both of you have a unique part of your background in that area.
Yeah. So then, when I started my collegiate studies, I was definitely stronger as a pianist than the singer. So I decided to really pursue piano playing. But I never stopped singing. So I was kind of like doubling as a sort of like a minor in voice throughout my studies. And as I was finishing my studies as a master's student, it was really clear for me to really pursue this vocal coaching pianist route so that I could use both of my skills. And when I really started teaching at a collegiate level about 10 years ago, that really just kind of like set my path forward. And this is what I really want to do. I want to work with singers.
That's amazing. We've had Dr. Boykin on the podcast before, but we wanted to check in and just see, has anything changed for you since we recorded in the Kennedy Center parking lot? It was, I think, three or 4 years ago, right before you had this cool opera that was debuting at the Kennedy Center. It was a project. And so Kira and I were like, well, let's just check in and see if anything has changed with Brittney in the past couple of seasons.
For the most part, no. I'm still busy writing. But I will say, as far as composition, I have ventured a lot more into the operatic realm. So that has been very exciting. I think, that was my first opera project. So since then, we have been busy working with opera and opera companies. So that's probably the biggest change right now. I'm still writing choral music, still love choral music, still have a few commissions and projects coming up with a few organizations, but opera is definitely taking over my composition focus right now. So it's been a little crazy.
Yeah, that's both of you are juggling a lot of different things at the moment and spinning a lot of different plates. It's pretty amazing that you were able to make an important decision, I think, to bring this session to ACDA. And we were really sad because of the timing of the session, I think, and maybe some others fell into this camp. It was Saturday around noon and the honor choirs were starting, and it was just so hard to try and get to everything. And I was just so devastated that I wasn't able to be there. And so we are just excited to chat. And if you don't mind, I'm going to read your session description just for those who don't have that background and then dive into some questions. So the description on the ACDA app, if you are a person that was using that, or in the Choral Journal, is this. So the session is titled Shattering Barriers, Empowering Women of Color in Choral Leadership. And the session description shared, join us for an empowering session dedicated to amplifying the voices of women conductors of color. Drawing upon academic research, real-world examples, and practical strategies, attendees will learn how to identify, navigate, and challenge the systemic barriers and biases that have hindered the advancement of women conductors of color in the field. In a landscape where traditional paths to success often overlook diverse perspectives, this session shines a spotlight on the resilience, creativity, and leadership of women who are forging new paths in the choral world. So we're so excited to dive in. And the first question for both of you, and feel free to answer in whatever format works, is what inspired you both to create and present this session at ACDA?
So I first met Brittney when I was teaching at another institution about 2 years ago. I had an opportunity to bring her in as a guest while we were working on a program that focused on women in music. And we were fortunate to have Brittney as a guest to speak about her compositions. And that sort of led us to just talk about our experiences that we've had so far. And we were just chatting about, this is something that not too many of us are talking about, especially in an open public forum. And so I invited her to work on this project together, and she graciously agreed.
That's amazing. Brittney, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, that was pretty much how it all started. So,
And now a quick word from our sponsors.
Conductor, 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 conductor.
Hey everyone, come check out the newest collaborations with Conductor and Call Time Clothing. Shop the newest designs from your favorite female conductor-owned clothing line, inspired by choir music education, made to order just for you. Get one of your own for $35 Canadian, or about $26 American, plus a flat rate shipping fee. Visit calltimeclothing.com today. Do you live near other conductors and want to save on shipping? Order multiple tees in one order so that you only pay one shipping fee. Visit calltimeclothing.com today or follow us on Instagram.
And we're back. So I know that you all got to give this session at ACDA, but just to dive into a little bit of some overview and then I think into some of the specifics that you talked about in your description, what are some of the most pervasive systemic challenges that women of color face in choral leadership today?
I think that was my area. The three that I focused on really were gender, of course, race, and surprisingly, other women. We found research that pointed to, a lot of gender discrimination and then, of course, racism. But of course, there are a few recent studies within the last few years that pointed to some women being barriers to other women in the field as well. We kind of talked a little bit about that and what that looked like.
Was that something that surprised the two of you, or was that something that maybe had been an undercurrent that you've experienced in your careers?
I think the people who were at the presentation, they were surprised. I think, especially in the past few years, we have seen some studies that talked about the lack of representation or how women, even in the progress that we have made, still, when you actually look at the hard numbers, we're still very much behind in the professional field of conducting. I think there's just so many ways to tackle these things, and just naming these things out in the open is the first step.
Yeah. And so what were some of the responses maybe to the other two big points that Brittney mentioned? Was there just general surprise in the room, a lot of agreement?
I think there was definitely agreement in the room. We did have some Q&A and discussion time at the end. That actually kind of turned into more of like an advocacy, Q&A commenting session about what people can do in academia or what people can do in their departments to maneuver through some of these barriers. And so I found that was really surprising because it showed that people want to help. It showed that people are caring. It shows that, maybe that there are some people who hold positions of power at their institutions who are very much wanting to be more aware of these barriers and wanting to fix them or at least address them going forward. So that was very encouraging.
I'm so glad that you had that dialogue time. I know that these podcast moments and some of the other times where we just get to sit down and have coffee with colleagues or actually get to talk and exchange ideas are some of the healthiest. And I think it's really amazing that you bring up this point of advocacy. And that's one of the questions I have to come to in a little bit. I know that in your session description, you talked about creativity, you talked about resilience, which I imagine also comes from personal experience and from the research that you were studying. And so I'm wondering if you could talk about how that came to the forefront of the session, and maybe if there are some examples of how women of color are redefining leadership in the choral world and how others might be able to support this action in actions, how people can support that.
Maybe Brittney, you can talk more about the creativity side, but when I was doing the research, there have been more recent studies about women in the conducting field, which is very, very encouraging. More people are writing papers and presenting, and the more people are talking about it, the better. I wanted to focus more on the Asian woman in the conducting field. In music schools throughout the United States, there are many Asian students represented, but when you actually look at the leadership roles, there are very, very few of us. So this was a great opportunity for me to look at what are some of the studies that have been done, and found very, very little. So I wanted to be the first step towards maybe this could be a conversation to invite more people to really see the reality and just kind of be more aware. And for example, the model minority myth of, Asian people are generally successful, so they're fine. They don't need our help. Like that stereotype is so prevalent, and it has really held up a lot of people. Or the language barrier, or most Asian people in America have the immigrant background and often are multilingual. And I also came to the United States as an immigrant, and English is my second language. And, it used to be so hard for me to stand up in front of people and speak in my second language because I was just very self-conscious. And that fear of being judged for an accent, for example, that alone can really hold someone back from just pursuing a career in leadership or conducting or something that would put them in front of people. And the discrimination for the accent, there's an accent stereotyping, and there was an AI generated study of exact same speech spoken by an Asian person and a white person, and most listeners found the Asian speaker to be harder to understand, even though it was the exact same speech. The biases that are just around us, and just being aware that that's there, and how to combat those biases was one of the key points that I wanted to bring up.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors.
Conductor, 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 conductor.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn Hagan, composer and founder of Compose Like a Girl, a choral series dedicated to empowering composers who identify as women through mentorship, publication, and promotion. With over 30 pieces in the series, with many different voicings, we're showcasing fresh, compelling music like Womankind by Emily Drum, The Infinity of Space by Ritika Bhattacharjee, and When I Become an Old Woman by Sherry Blevins. Explore the catalog at jocelynhagan.com/composelikeagirl and graphitepublishing.com.
And we're back. Brittney, do you have anything that you want to add or share?
I can talk about the leadership part. So after I talked about the barriers and, again, only highlighted the 3 because there are clearly more. And those are kind of the things that we talked about, kind of being outside of your control. You don't really have control of your race or your gender or, how people treat you in the workplace. So what is within your control, and focusing on how you show up in your workplace. I took a kind of individual look at what is most important, and that's building relationships. So if you want to be a leader in your department or even in your artistic kind of organization, workplace area, you have to focus on relationships. And so what does that look like? I did an acronym with the word lead. So figuring out your L means leadership identity. Like, what are your core values? What kind of impact do I want to create in the choirs that I lead? E is for embracing connection. And so what are some qualities that you bring specifically to conducting, and thinking about how do those strengths hopefully contribute to your ensembles as well as your professional spaces that you work in. And then the A means awareness about yourself, and figuring out what are some things that you can improve on. Maybe is that conducting technique? Is that programming? Is that, being a better just overall person in the workplace, and just figuring out and taking a few moments to figure out having an awareness of yourself. And then the D is demonstrate. And that's basically, what are you doing to be a role model for others? We talked about that. Yeah. And then I had some books that I also shared. Those were some of the things that I gave as far as tips on maneuvering through kind of the workplace, as far as ideas to maneuver through some of those barriers that we talked about earlier.
So leadership identity, embracing connection, awareness, and then demonstrate was the acronym for LEAD. Do you mind sharing some of since this wasn't the discussion portion, what were some of the responses? And for both you and Erika, maybe what were you like, big nods of, yes, this is things we're connecting with, or things that were sort of surprises or new takeaways from that experience?
I feel like I saw people connecting with it. I saw people taking notes. And yeah, I definitely saw some nods while we talked about this particular section. Erika and I kind of alternated. So I talked about the barriers and then I talked about some of these leadership skills. But I feel like overall, like, yeah, everyone was very attentive and taking notes.
Maybe I should have talked about this first, but so before Brittney went into tips for how to navigate in the workplace, I started with different elements of experiences that I have found myself or from the studies, naming what are the barriers themselves. Maybe I can share some of these with you to start. Lack of representation. I already touched on this a little bit. And then the racial and gender stereotypes and the cultural expectations. I think this was maybe a new one for some people. In some cultures, the women are expected to not stand out or be assertive, especially in some cultures from immigrant communities where like the gender standards are even more different from even the United States. Like women being seen as somebody who is very strong and assertive is considered negative in some cultures. Imposter syndrome, I talked about this, a little bit, like just even having a little bit of an accent in front of people that alone can be a barrier. And just thinking that, oh, how could I be the one to be telling people what to do? That's definitely a big one. Microaggressions in so many different forms, but like mispronouncing names or your English is really good when that person's first language is English. And the tokenism. Okay, great. Your organization is doing their best to hire a woman of color, but the person has to work on every committee there is. Always there is a reminder that was this like the diversity hire. There's like the negativity that comes with being the token person of color.
Yes.
I suggested different strategies at every level of leadership. So I started with, if you're a teacher in a classroom, how can you highlight the differences in some of the students? If you have a student of color in your classroom, a woman who is really interested possibly in a leadership position, how can we empower that student for the future? Or if you are in a position where you are on a hiring committee, what biases can you notice so that you don't make the same mistakes as, maybe in the previously? Or if you're in a leadership position of an organization of our school, like what changes can you make?
I'm a cisgendered white woman. That's my positionality in the world. And yet I teach a beautifully diverse population of students who are coming from all sorts of different backgrounds and upbringings and representations, and wanting to be able to uplift those voices who, like you mentioned, maybe in their own household have been told to blend in. They don't feel maybe as empowered to stand out. So what were some of the strategies that you all shared, if you don't mind?
If you have a student who is learning English as a second language, maybe celebrate having an accent. Maybe celebrate having a different musical background. Maybe that person never studied classical music before coming to your choir. I brought up my personal experience of having a student who was a star in mariachi singing, but she had never studied classical singing before. And, there were some pushbacks from some of my colleagues about the very specific style that she was singing some of the classical pieces. But that just made me think about, this person is so talented and has an amazing voice. Just because that person does not fit the curriculum that has been determined by the people who were here maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago. Is that the only way to move forward in teaching these younger students who just have so much talent, but just a different background?
And now, a quick word from our sponsors.
Conductor, 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 conductor.
The Conductor Choral Series, powered by Music Spoke, is an intentional platform that highlights the voices of women and their allies in the choral music world. This series is designed to elevate and celebrate the contributions of women throughout history, as well as those currently shaping the music scene. Its name, Conductor, intertwines the role of a conductor with the concept of empowerment and the recognition of women in music, a field where their contributions have often been overlooked or underrepresented.
The series serves as a celebration of diverse women's voices, composers, conductors, singers, and advocates, by providing access to choral works that reflect their unique perspectives, creativity, and experiences. Through this collection, Music Spoke gives both emerging and established composers the opportunity to share their voices with the choral community, providing a sense of inclusivity, visibility, and accessibility to repertoire. Check out the Conductor Choral Series today for your next concert.
And we're back. So you talked about this strategy to uplift or celebrate what is different. I guess I'm wondering, when there's maybe pushback to that, what might you offer someone in that situation?
That's very interesting because I think I shared as a presentation, my degrees are not in conducting, and yet I'm a conductor. And so I think it's important for people to realize, like, just because someone may not have the education or the background or the experience doesn't mean that they're not qualified to do something. And so my entire education trajectory was about pivoting. It wasn't because I didn't apply to a choral conducting program. It wasn't because I didn't apply to a composition program. We just had people in place at that time that didn't think that I was worthy of being in that program. And so I think it's important for people to understand and see, like, hey, if you have a student that has a particular talent or interest, to kind of encourage that and uplift that. And not because you haven't seen something in your program, not because you haven't had Black women students come through your program, that it's like this kind of foreign thing, so we shouldn't do it. But maybe just take a closer look at what are their gifts and where are their strengths, and try to really focus on that and uplift that.
Yeah, Brittney and I have, similar background in that we get to do what we do not just because of the stereotypical paths that we've taken. I feel like a lot of the choral conductors had sort of like a similar path. And I think there's so many gifts that different people from different backgrounds can contribute to the choral world. And I think that's the common thread between our career paths.
Mm.
Yeah. And I think I would also add, if you're having barrier after barrier, closed door, what are some things you can do? I always like to encourage people to focus on the passion. If you love conducting, if you love writing music, it doesn't mean that just because you didn't get accepted into a particular program that you are not supposed to be a conductor, that you are not supposed to be a composer. Just figure out a different way to do what you love and allow that to guide you.
I love this example. Every time you reference the presentation or share some of your experiences or ideas, that I think should be these strategies that we can all take and implement in our own institutions. I keep going back to the acronym that you shared, Brittney, of the LEAD, and how both of you are really demonstrating all of the ways that we can impact our space. You talked about the statistics and the research about women not supporting women. And that's something Kira and I have also found in our research. And we quote Marin Alsop often saying, that's just not it. Like, that's not what we're going to do. Women need to uplift other women. What might you offer as strategies, in addition to what you've already said, how allies and allies of women can support the advancement of women of color, specifically in whether it be leadership or wanting to become a bigger part of the choral community? Well, we'll just start there.
I'll go first. I'll just say the common phrase, when you see something, say something. I think that is the most important thing when it comes to allyship, because it shows that you care when you see something that is not okay in the workplace. I know that I have really great colleagues where I work, and I've been very fortunate, and they have no problem speaking up on things. And I really appreciate that, because sometimes I wonder if I can say things because I don't want to come off a certain way. I don't want to be labeled as the angry Black woman. But when I have allies in the room or colleagues in the room who are able to speak up and say, hey, let's look at this, or let's reevaluate this, it takes that burden off of our shoulders. That is very important. And it shows that you value the relationship and you value who you work with.
And now, a quick word from our sponsors.
Conductor, 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 conductor.
Hey, Kira.
Hey, McKenna.
You know what choral directors are always looking for?
What?
Well, as choral directors, we are always looking for new pieces to program for our upcoming concerts, and Pavon Publishing is proud to have some outstanding women composers and conductors in its catalog.
Wow, what are some of the new releases?
Well, let me tell you. Canto e Liberta by Diana Saez and Suzette Ortiz for treble voices, piano, and percussion. It was premiered under the direction of Dr. Iris Levine from Conductor Season 1 and is in her Pavon Treble Choral series.
Ukrainian composer Irina Alexichuk's Holy Lord of Hosts is stunning and was premiered in the U.S. by Grant Gershon and the LA Master Chorale. Grant has launched his new series with Pavon in support of this remarkable composer.
Zenaida Robles, one of the most sought-after female writers, will have her latest composition, The Summit is Nigh, premiered at the ACDA National Convention in Dallas this March. Again, a Conductor Season 2 interviewee.
Janaea Robison, conductor of the Lutheran National Choir, has 2 new offerings: an SATB voicing of her successful setting of I Wonder as I Wander, and new editions of Bach's cantata BWV 118, with alternative lyrics that enables performances from Advent and Christmas to Palm Sunday and Easter. Check out Pavon Publishing today at pavonpublishing.com.
And we're back.
Of course, when you have the opportunity to recommend someone for an opportunity, I always try to include my women colleagues as my go-to people to recommend, either as conductors or composers. I always make sure to program. That's because that is a realm that I have 100% control over, who I get to program and perform their music and really let their artwork just be displayed to the public.
We just got to perform Silver Rain a couple weeks ago on the Levana concert here at FSU. And we did that as a partnership with one of the local middle school choirs here. And that was a really beautiful collaboration. They loved it. It was awesome. And had a student cellist who just, ate up that line. It's so beautiful. And
please send me that recording if you have it. Please.
I will. Yes. It's coming. It's good. I'll send it to you. And they just loved it. But one of the strategies from talking with some of our other guests on the podcast that I've been implementing in the classroom, because we've also talked about this idea of tokenism, is that as we're going through our repertoire, is for every single composer and every single poet of the repertoire that we're studying, I'm lucky to have a really big projector in the room. And so whether we get the chance to dive deeply into all of the nuances of the composer or the poet, just being able to put up on the screen the picture, the dates, where that person is from and what they're doing is something that I've found at least effective, or I'm trying to bring into the classroom. All of my students were so excited to see Brittney and then Langston Hughes, who wrote that poetry. And then the next slide is Pergolesi, and they also get to see him in, what they think the wig looked like. And so just trying to provide those students with the chance just to see. You were talking about that, Erika, in terms of your programming, and also just to share, like, this is the music, and there's more to the music than just.
Yeah, I think that's just such an important way, and it's such an easy step that we as conductors can just implement on a day-to-day basis. Is, okay, of course, yes, let's celebrate women composers 1 month of the year, but let's not stop there. Let's make sure that we see women, and especially women composers of color, on every program, so that it's not a special thing for a short period of the year. And I think that's the same for conductors. Yes. The more women and women of color are seen on the podium, that is that much more impactful for the next generation of the girls who are maybe pondering the possibility, but they just didn't see anybody else do it. And maybe we can be the first people to really influence their decisions to dream of becoming a conductor in the future.
That sort of segues into a leadership question. And I know that there are some regions in the United States that I think have been doing a really great job of paving the way, like ACDA East, with their regional lineup of conductors last time were all women of color, which was just absolutely incredible. And then looking at Linnell Joy Jenkins' program at ACDA National that just took place a couple weeks ago in Dallas, it was so incredible.
So incredible.
So I'm wondering for you two, how do you envision the future of choral leadership if more organizations embrace the principles and strategies that you've talked about today? What do you see or what do you hope for?
I hope that we can continue on the trajectory that we have been on. I think it's just going to be a little complicated over the next couple of years. And so figuring out how to maneuver yet another barrier is probably going to be the most important thing. But I think I will be curious to see how we do it together, because we were already headed in one direction. And so with this current political climate, I'll be curious to see how we can continue that in a different way, but also do it together.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think past several years, it has been on such a great role of, seeing changes happen at a larger organizations. I would like to add, especially the immigrant communities in the United States have been kind of left out. Asian conductors have been completely left out of the conversation when it comes to representation. Asian people in the United States have not been a large part of the conversation when it comes to race in the classical music. And I think the immigrant voices can be amplified through the conductors of color who especially have the immigrant background.
Thanks for sharing that, Erika. We've been lucky enough on the past couple of seasons to have some amazing guests, including you two now, which is fabulous. And so we interviewed this season Pearl Shanquan, and she talked about especially discrimination that she has faced and the Asian community has faced since the COVID-19 pandemic. And she shared about some of those experiences, which were heartbreaking to hear. And then we had Julie Yu on the season prior, two prominent Asian women conductors. And Julie Yu said how often she and Pearl have their headshots switched in different all states or other arts organizations. And so I think it speaks volumes to the need to continue to amplify all women of color, but this immigrant community or community of Asian women conductors, there's a line of research and the strength of that continues to grow every time somebody adds on to that. And so if there's not a lot of research in that department, it's time, everybody. So if you have an interest or a passion, you should reach out to Erika, maybe to see about continuing to bolster that thread, because it definitely needs it. We have a lot of young women of color who listen to the podcast or might be adjacent to the podcast. And so if they are out there listening, for young women of color who are aspiring to lead in the choral field, what message or piece of advice would you want them to hear today?
I would say allow your passion to be your purpose, figuring out what that looks like. And as long as you are able to be grounded in who you are, whether that's a conductor, teacher, musician, or all the above, please know that relationships are so important. So being sure that you show up in a way that is very honest and filled with integrity, in addition to your musicianship, that will make or break your career as a conductor. So be sure that you're mindful of how you show up.
I would say that the differences that we bring is a gift to the whole community. I came to the choral community because of the people, because of the community that makes you feel you belong, and the differences that we can bring, that's going to make it that much better. So don't be afraid that you don't look like, you don't sound like, whatever else, the differences. Don't be afraid of them. Let's be proud of the differences, and let's continue on this journey of creating a community together.
Thank you. I think the only last question that we had is just if there's anything else that you all wanted to share, and thinking about this line of research and maybe how you envision proceeding with this. Do you think that it's something that you will continue exploring, or is there anything that you would want to talk about in that direction? Is there more to say? Maybe will this session appear somewhere else again, maybe in the future?
I think the only other thing I wanted to say is we also had ideas for resources for young conductors. So people who are looking for like their community, please know that they are out there. I shared that I'm in a Black women conductor and composer group on Facebook. And so for those young people that are looking for connection and sisterhood and fellowship, please be sure to find the group. It's literally called Black Women Conductors and Composers, and we will admit you. There are communities out there. There are support groups. Find your people, because we are out there and you are not alone.
Since the presentation, I have gotten some emails or Instagram messages from some younger conductors who took something away from the presentation, and I would love to continue the relationship with just connecting with the younger conductors, aspiring conductor students, to continue the conversation. And I would love to be somebody who can be in their corners.
I so appreciate you both giving a little bit of the session recap. And I know that you have research and resources that we would love to support and share as well. It can be so hard at ACDA to get to everything, but this was such an important session. I'm glad that it was a part of the offering. As you all continue in your journey, I hope that I get to be there in person one day to get the full throttle edition with the slides. And I know that so many out there feel the same. So we just appreciate you coming on today to share a little bit. And thank you so much for all that you are doing for this field to support and to help us all grow.
Thank you. Of course. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. For those who are new to Conductor or returners, remember to check out our social media and our website, conductor.com. We've got lots of resources and lots of great content that'll be coming out over this 4th season. So thanks for tuning in.
Thank you for listening. This has been Conductor. This episode was engineered and mixed by Mary Hannah Klontz, with intro and outro music by Flo Garut and ad music by Kate Crellin.
Discover more resources at conductor.com.